Before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. Hello, and welcome back to the Enneagram and Writing. If you're unfamiliar with the Enneagram, I recommend that you go back and watch the first video in the series where I lay down some foundation for what I'll be referencing and kind of explain what the Enneagram is about. So go check it out if you haven't already. But today, I am super excited to be talking about the Enneagram Type 1, which is often called the Reformer or the Perfectionist. Enneagram 1s are driven, principled, and often have a tumultuous relationship with the rules, to say the least. Above all else, 1s need to do the right thing, and at their best, they have this ability to intimately know right from wrong. This internal moral compass isn't unique to the Type 1s, but for 1s, it's like an integral part of their identity. This moral compass and what is right, it's a part of who they are. And this honestly makes believing that you are what you do a really easy trap for 1s to fall into. When they're at their worst, 1s tend to lose sight of this need to do right and fall into a need to be right. And this dynamic makes for some really interesting character structures, which you will see in the next video. 1s are very grounded, practical people. They can still be emotional and empathetic, of course, but being in the body triad, they naturally process by doing. 1s are doers, and as such, they tend to be very task-oriented. Are always great to have by your side when you have a tough decision or need wise counsel, because they bring this clarity and authentic honesty into their environment, which makes them really great motivators and really great organizers. And when they're at their best, 1s can use this focus and drive to spur people on to goodness. They take these inner resources and direct them outward. And this really they're always looking to help repair the brokenness that they see in the world, whether that be in courtrooms or in living rooms. I, an Enneagram Type 4, seem to be constantly surrounded by 1s in my life, which is really funny if you're familiar with the Enneagram. Both my mom and my older brother are 1s, a lot of my really good friends are 1s, and honestly, I think I know more Type 1s than I do any other number. Which is a little scary. It's a little scary. I really do love them though. They bring a real honesty and a real directness to everything they do, and they're not afraid of hardship or struggle. They know what they want, and they're always charting a clear path to get there. My favorite thing about the Type 1, however, it's got to be their ability to see. Well, see, 1s have this almost supernatural ability to see everything twice. They see the ideal world with everything in its place and everything as it should be. And then they see the world as it is with all of its little imperfections. And when 1s are unhealthy, this can cause a lot of frustration. And this type, along with 4 and 7, are often called the frustrated idealists. And I think that's just so perfect. But this sight that they have, it does leave them frustrated because they see a lack in the world around them. They see all the ways that things could be better, and therefore all of the ways that it's not. This is actually the second time I'm recording this video because the first time I didn't close my door and the mic picked up a lot of background noise. And I was debating oh, maybe I could just post it and maybe it'll be fine. But then I was like, no, Caleb, you can't. You can't, because how rude would that be to give Enneagram 1s a video I'm trying to empathize with and understand you, and then throw in a bunch of just little things that are I know you're gonna see it. I know it's gonna bother you. And so it just made me laugh because I want to honor you, and I think it's really cool. Because when they're at their best, 1s don't see those imperfections as a falling short, but as a chance for growth. And when they're in that headspace, 1s they bring out the best in everything. They can take a room full of hurt, broken people and then bring them together in joy and in grace to do good. And It's just incredible to watch, y'all. I love ones. A core part of the Enneagram and the motivations of each type is the childhood wound. As children, ones compared themselves to the rules and the standards of their holding environment and found themselves to be inadequate. So they took on this wounding message that their mistakes weren't acceptable and they had to live properly in order to receive love. And now, if you're a parent or a caretaker watching this, the last thing I want to do is make you feel ashamed or guilty about how you raised your kids. Because as kids, we experience all 9 of the standard Enneagram childhood wounds. But one of them naturally cements itself in our minds. And honestly, more often than not, this is a perceived wound on the part of the child than an actual wound per se. So this isn't about judgment. It's not about flawed parenting. It's just about the broken world that we live in. But in a way, also the chance that this can be redeemed. And I think that's really cool. But because of this feeling of inadequacy, ones felt disconnected from love and from their childlike innocence. So they take on this responsibility to know what is true and know what is right in order to reconnect with the love that they feel they lost. Ones have a very strong inner critic that is constantly replaying standards in their heads and always showing them how they just don't measure up. And this, understandably, creates a lot of anger in the one's life. But because anger doesn't line up with the one's perfect image of themselves, they bury it. And this sort of smoldering resentment is something the type 1 has to struggle with because it's an expression of that inner wound. It's that idea that they won't ever be good enough. And that's the fear of the type 1. Ones are afraid that no matter what they do, they will never be good enough to deserve love. When ones are living in that lie, they sink into very deep cycles of performance and perfection. Ones are often called the perfectionist, actually, but I don't really like that name because of how deeply it's connected to the shadow of the type. And that's what this is, this search for perfection. When ones are unhealthy, their inner critic gets louder and louder, and that buried anger gets hotter and hotter, sometimes just erupting to the surface when you least expect it. It's really easy for ones to become bitter in this space because it's hard. And they latch on to judgment and control in order to stave off the fear that they are inherently flawed. And this is where that internal moral compass starts to get a little bit skewed. Because when ones are unhealthy, they need to be right. That's a really big thing for them. And if they're not careful, it's very easy to become crusaders because they believe that if they can't justify their mission, they have nothing left. In this space, it's often common for the type 1 to disintegrate to the negative qualities of the type 4, where they become more brooding, more self-centered, and get mired in this feeling of shame because on the inside, they really believe that they won't ever be good enough. This all sounds really horrible and depressing, but don't worry, that's the shadow of the type, and it's hard to hear, but there's hope in there too. And for ones, this hope looks like grace. Since ones grew up believing that before they could be loved, they needed to be perfect. They're always striving and always finding themselves inadequate. But what ones need to realize is that grace means love doesn't come with an entry fee. The songwriter and composer Ryan O'Neal, who makes music under the name Sleeping at Last, he wrote these words for his song One. And I think they sum up the process of redemption for this type just so beautifully. And he's an amazing songwriter. Go check out his music because he's great. But this is what he wrote. Now I have learned my lesson. The price of this so-called perfection is everything. I've spent my whole life searching desperately to find out that grace requires nothing of me. And that's what I really wish for every type 1, that they would know grace requires nothing of them. No entry fee, no price tag, no standards. Because love was never meant to be something that we had to be worthy of. When ones are connected to this grace, it helps quiet the voice of that inner critic, and the one can start letting go of that smoldering resentment inside them. Because for the one, that anger isn't really anger at the world for being wrong, it's anger at themselves for not being good enough to fix it. But through grace, ones start to learn to let go of that. And when they're healthy, ones learn to be okay with imperfection, learn to accept the beauty of where they are. And in short, since they no longer have to be perfect, they can start being good. And in that space, the one is able to use that superpower of seeing to its fullest extent. And instead of being angry at flaws, they forgive. And often in that forgiveness, they're able to find a way forward. And when this happens, they start to exhibit the positive energy of the type 7. They're integrating to 7. And ones who are connected to this energy are more outgoing, they're more adventurous, and they're willing to let go of the strictures they held themselves to because they're no longer bound to their fear of being wrong. And healthy ones are probably the most inspiring people that can be imagined because their incredibly powerful moral compass is now coupled with the means and grace to live well and to give and receive love. Thanks for being here. I really hope that if you are a type 1, that this rang true with your experience and it was honoring, uplifting, and honest. If you're not, I hope this helped you learn a little bit more and gain a little perspective on who these incredible people really are. So like, subscribe, share this video with your type 1 friends, and check out part 2 of this video on how to write Enneagram Ones that is available now.